Hello and welcome back to my channel. A couple of days have gone by since my last update, which seems daring to let days go by and not give you one of my little videos. I'm going to start spacing them out more, I think, so maybe I'll just do a few a week rather than every day. I keep saying that. Anyway, this is an update because I'm kind of on holiday now. Yesterday, I hesitate to say, but I cleared my desk. I put in all the emails and documents and outlines that I needed to and delivered everything. I even did some edits on a novel, my next Elsie Mason novel, which comes out next year. I had a whole bunch of severe, not that severe, edits I had to do, and usually I have to add text to things rather than editing. Kind of sounds as if you're taking things away and making it smaller and more concise. What I usually have to do is supply extra words and allow certain characters to think aloud inside their heads so we can follow their processes more. These kinds of sagas that I'm writing as Elsie Mason depend very much on identification of the reader with the main characters. And so you have to follow all their processes. And I'm used to kind of making the reader work harder and jump to realizations. But in these books, we have to be able to voice the emotion very clearly. And that's quite a challenge. And it's a good thing to do. And it really makes you think about the relationships, the very complex relationships in these Elsie novels about the 16 streets. Anyway, so I did that and I got in my outline for another project, a big project that I want to write next year with one company, and a novel outline. And I'm going to have to wait for all those coming back for the next stage, the next draft, or commissioning, or whatever comes next. So I don't know exactly how next year is going to fall out yet. But that's at least 5 different publishers and editors and 5 different projects that things have gone in for. So that's quite a lot. And I've decided that with my desk being clear at this point, I'm going to read. I'm going to sit here or in the garden or go out with my books and just read. As I keep saying, my life has always been this business of what needs doing, how do I go about it, how do I make time, how do I fight time to get time enough to read, and often that means pushing back, seeing friends or doing things or organising things, although I do like to bring people together and organise do's when friends are all together. It is a constant battle, though, to make time enough for me to sit with just books. Anyway, arrivals in the post this week. I haven't bought so many books, but there was some whimsical purchases, as in on a whim rather than being particularly whimsical. I got my copy of this. I talked about this the other day. Wilkie Collins and Charles Dickens writing together in, is it 1857? Yeah. The lazy tour of 2 idle apprentices. I heard about it when I was doing a little bit of research, and I knew that they'd written a ghost story together in Lancaster at some point. And I thought, I must find out what that is, because we knew about it when I was a student there, but I never found out. And it turns out they wrote this whole book together about a tour they took. And they wrote this silly comic joint travel log that includes a couple of ghost stories. And it turned up the other day in a really nice edition from, is it Hesperus Press? I don't know what else they do. They're interesting. What do they do? Hesperus Press is committed to bringing near what is far, both in space and time. So they're neglected or little known texts by classic authors. That's interesting. I'm just reading the first chapter of this, where they go to Carlisle by train and then decide to walk, and then they go up a mountain in the Lake District and get a bit lost in the fog, and they paint themselves out to be two complete idiots, really, just fools, idle apprentices, and it's very funny and ironic. So I'm looking forward to that's going in my pile of books for the next couple of weeks. I'll maybe talk about what's in the next couple of weeks in a second. Also in the post, this ridiculous volume. It looks like a drag queen has designed this volume of H.P. Lovecraft. I don't know what made me do it. He'd cropped up in mentions of things, and I put aside that Sherlock Holmes meets Cthulhu book for Halloween reading for autumn. And what else? I'd been thinking about the other people who'd written Cthulhu stories and how interesting that was. And I remembered the novel I read about 10 years ago, the road trip novel, and I forget who wrote it. It was two fellas, and it was about Robert E. Howard and H.P. Lovecraft and a Las Vegas stripper on a road trip across America fighting monsters. I must dig that out. That was a really good novel. Anyway, it all made me think, where's my copies of Lovecraft? And I thought I should buy a nice big volume, and I ended up with this ridiculous thing from is it Books Two Door. The print is tiny. It's a ridiculous thing, bound and printed in India, and clearly just where they run things straight off the internet and put them in a leather binding, and fools like me end up buying them. Look at those end papers. There's something kind of charmingly silly and naive about the whole thing. I think that's so funny on the front. The the marauding octopus creature eating the lighthouse. There's something endearing about it, as there is for me about Lovecraft. He just seems such a knobhead, basically. Somebody once told me years ago that he was the most sophisticated author in the world because he had the largest vocabulary. And it is that kind of teenage thing of, using long words for the sake of it. He kind of does that. And whenever he builds up suspense, it's always this kind of ridiculous bathos behind it, and this feeling that he's going to burst out and say something completely inappropriate, which is probably true. Anyway, I thought it would be a nice thing to dip into, and it still makes me laugh. I love the idea of drag queen Cthulhu. Maybe I ought to write that. One of the great things about the whole world of horror writing is how serious some of the people are involved in that. And I remember a close friend at the time who was a horror writer having an argument with Jeremy online, and he was saying that no, horror's never camp. It's a very serious business, horror fiction. And Jeremy just laughing and saying, no, it's not. There's a big camp streak through every form of horror. These things are inextricably bound. And the two of them settled on Vincent Price. And Jeremy said everything he was in was camp as tits, and this bloke wasn't having it. Vincent Price was a serious, earnest actor. And things like The Abominable Dr. Phibes weren't in any way camp. Slightly homophobic in this argument. He was the kind of horror writer who, in other posts on Facebook, and this is why I had to stop really kind of seeing what he was writing, he'd say things like, why does this young tennis player have to come out? Surely people are beyond coming out these days. We don't need people to come out. And why should there be such a thing as pride? Surely we should have straight pride. So as soon as you hear people saying that, it's like, no, homophobe. Because that's what's hiding and lurking underneath those kinds of questions. Anyway, the third book, a bit serious there. The third book to arrive is this. Another, as if I needed it, another retelling of Robin Hood. But you see, it's a Hamlyn book. Can you see there? No, it's a Hamlyn book from the 70s. Hamlyn did the best illustrated kids' books. I'm looking along my shelf of non-fiction. I'll go through them someday. But I can see just there the Hamlyn Book of Myths and Legends, the Encyclopedia of Mythology. What else? The books on Greek myths that I was using last year that had the most beautiful illustrations all came from Hamlyn. They were just, I think, made with real care. And this is a retelling of Robin Hood by Bernard Miles, who is an actor whose name is familiar. I'll have to look him up. I know he was an actor and an author. And this is illustrated by Victor G. Ambrose, who did illustrations for Puffin books. And the pictures are marvellous. You could tell it's just big and generous, you see. You could tell from the post from whoever it was on Facebook said they just got a copy of this and it had been one of their favourites. I wish I'd known this book when I was a kid. As you know, I love all retellings of Robin Hood. And my whole business of doing these Doctor Who books where they're mashed up with Puffin books, and Wonderland came out yesterday, is that these really are some of my favourites from being a kid. And that's why I guess these books have an extra charge for me for doing them, an extra buzz. There was one very homoerotic bit. I can't remember where. See, what's good as well is it includes the whole story, so we end up with the dreadful tale of the nun who kills him in the end, at the end of the Robin Hood cycle. Here's Richard the Lionheart, this part of the story, which is the bit that I used in my Doctor Who book, but it all gets clearly a bit saucy in this version. Anyway, that's the death of Robin. You see, there's the terrible nun in Yorkshire who bleeds him to death. And then he fires the arrow out of the window, doesn't he? And that's where he gets buried. There's little John. I wonder if the earlier bits are full of excitement and joy. I hope so. See, they're just gorgeous. Gorgeous pictures. I keep holding up pictures of this camera, don't I? Anyway, that's my, those are my purchases this week. All of them quite cheap, really. Even that massive H.P. Lovecraft was kind of massively discounted, probably because nobody else would want such a thing. I'm going to try and not buy so many books. I've not really been out shopping or charity book shopping or any of that stuff recently. I've been so concentrated on this work stuff. I've not even been drawing or doing pictures for a while. So I need to dig down and think what it is I like doing. And that really means reading and some pictures and writing for its own sake. I actually did a 2,000 word piece the other day out of nowhere because they're knocking down Woodham Comp. On Facebook, the Woodham Academy, as it now is in Newton Aycliffe, was talking about how they built a new school for billions and gazillions of pounds, and they'd knocked down, or they were about to knock down, the comprehensive that I went to, that had opened in 1970, and I'd attended from 81 to when it was quite new, actually. It didn't feel new until 1988. And people had gone on tours. They were invited to go and look at the old place. And luckily, I couldn't get there, but luckily, lots of people took many photos of all the rooms and all the corridors. And you have these photos where you see these middle-aged people wandering about in this empty school, looking slightly lost and nostalgic, and still enthralled to their formative years. It's a place I look at with very mixed feelings, huge nostalgia. I learnt so much about everything, but fear as well, and lots of misery. that's just growing up. But I ended up just splurging memories, following in my head room to room through the school. I've only done half of it, but writing down scenes and moments I remember in different rooms. And it turns out for every single room in those photos, every room I can remember in that school, I had a memory, some kind of moment that's just been jostling about in my head all this time. So that's something I wrote for the sake of it, just blazing through, pages online on Word, because I type quite fast. So it's actually faster for me to write down ideas and stuff on a Word document than it is to write in pen in my journal. I've just thought of that. Of course it is. And that's why when I write in my journal, which I do almost every day, and I'm using a fancy moleskin one just now with no lines, which makes me even freer, this is slower. And so it forces me to slow down my thoughts and order sentences. When I type on Word, it's like, whoa, kind of whizzing through, hand to eye is very quick. And that's not because I'm a great touch typist, because I'm not. I never learned to type. I taught myself to type using one hand when I was about 9 on a plastic petite typewriter. And I can't get out of that habit now. I just type fast, but with one hand, which is just as well, because the other hand's holding the laptop over here while the cat sits on my lap. I'll twist my back to pieces and give myself all sorts of injuries, I know. Anyway, here's the books that I've decided, I think, for the next week, 2 weeks. I'm going to finish today. I'm going to finish this Mary Lou Batman Nightwalker, which after a middle bit when I thought, oh, am I enjoying this? I really am enjoying this. I think it's a good teen novel, very action-packed, but you absolutely believe in this Bruce Wayne who's very conflicted and in love with the person who's going to be who is a villain. Yeah, it's you can see it as a film, and it's good. It's well done. Although it's very slickly written, but I've noticed 3 times she says the glass window, and then another time she says the round sphere. You'd think these things would be copy edited because there's so many people involved when it's writing for a franchise that these things would be obliterated in the copy editing stage. But round spheres and glass windows we don't need. And I'm going to get on to my next book club book for our local group, Puffball Fair Weldon. I've no idea what it's about yet. London, straight couples, infidelity, baby, probably, bit of feminism. Not to caricature it, but I bet that's what it is. And then I want to go on to Jonathan Carroll, a nice thin second novel from him. So I've got a touch of, what do we even call the 70s, 80s? In comics, they call it the kind of Bronze Age, don't they? It's also the time of kind of classic, the golden age of BBC TV drama. It's the classic age of Doctor Who. So I don't know, there should be a word for it. I mean, I guess it's, it's not contemporary fiction anymore, but it's late 20th century fiction, I suppose. Literary fiction. But also it's not just literary fiction, because she was intensely popular. She was a kind of magazine writer, and she was comic, darkly comic. So I'm not sure what you call her, really. Maybe we don't need the labels. A bit of dark fantasy with Jonathan Carroll, a bit of tie-in and Star Trek with The Starless World, which I've been waiting to get to, my Wilkie Collins and Dickens, which I really want it to be good. I really want it to be worth keeping this list as I am of all the locations that they go to, so I can make it into an odyssey of my own. That's what I want to do. A contemporary gay horror comedy thing. Bored Gay Werewolf, which I've had recommended again and again and bought a couple of weeks ago, and I've been waiting to get to. I guess I've been hoarding these up as proper holiday reads. And on holiday, I have to have at least one classic puffin that I haven't read before, as I make my way through all the things I missed as a kid. This would have struck me as very boring as a kid, I think. I'd be looking for something more action-packed. It's Minnow on the Say by Philippa Pearce. Now, everything I've read by Philippa Pearce, somebody I missed out on in childhood completely, I think, apart from Tom's Midnight Garden. That was her, wasn't it? I think, yes, it was. Of course it was. I loved that and didn't read any more. In more recent years, I've read A Dog So Small, The Battle of Bubble and Squeak, Who's Afraid, and other strange stories. The Shadow Cage, and other tales of the supernatural. And everything I've read has been marvellous. It looks so perfectly puffinish and summer holiday-ish. This one is about kids on boats in the summer, I think. David can't believe his luck. Wedged by the landing stage at the bottom of the garden, there's a canoe which has been washed down the river by floods. It's at least 10 feet long, big enough for 2 people. So when he finds its real owner, Adam, they make friends and repair it together. But when it comes to deciding what to do with the boat, Adam comes up with his own plans to search for his family's lost treasure. And the minnow takes the boys on a treasure hunt in a race against time. Apparently it's quite nice. So we'll see. I'll just make a pile of 6 or 7, and that should do me for 2 weeks, I would have thought. And that takes me up to Levency and Pride, which does start in 2 weeks' time exactly. And that's what Jeremy's out and about organising now. Right, I'm going to stop and go back to Batman and maybe make some lunch as well. I hope you're all good and having a nice end of the week. This should go out on Saturday, so I hope by then it's a really sunny and lovely weekend for you. Okay, goodbye. I'll see you again soon in the next episode.